My son, who said to me, he's like, "Oh, Mom, why don't you eat some fruit? It's healthy for you." And I said to him, I'm like, "Well, honey, there's carbs in fruit and carbs are bad for you." And he looks up at me with his big brown eyes. He's like, "Well, Mom, if carbs are so bad for you, why are you feeding them to us?" And I was like, oh my God, like, what are my actions teaching my kids? And so it was in that moment, I knew I had to make a change. It wasn't necessarily just for me, but also for my kids.
Hey y'all, Josh Tomioni with the Derelict Podcast. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Would you do me a favor? It will only take you a couple seconds. Whether you're listening or watching right now, will you head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button? It really helps us get this message to more and more people that we can help. Greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey there, you derelicts. Welcome to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. I am your host, Josh the Derelict, otherwise known as Josh Tomioni by birth. We have another amazing guest here today, Shar. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I was so excited to be here. And yeah, I'm really excited to dive into this.
This is awesome. One of the reasons I invited Shar, or we talked about, I don't remember who invited who. Maybe you reached out to me. Maybe I reached out to you. I can't remember. But either way, I'll just say that I invited you. One of the reasons I invited Shar for all of you is that, you know, we talk a lot about men on this podcast. We talk a lot about men's issues. Even the women that we have on here generally are talking about men and men's issues. And we talk also a lot about middle-aged men. We talk about men going through difficult things like divorce and dealing with midlife stuff and dealing with nutrition and a whole bunch of other stuff. And the thing we don't really talk a whole lot about is women on here. We talk about them in relation to men, but that's kind of the point of the podcast, is to talk about men becoming more authentically themselves. But I thought it'd be really interesting to have Shar on here because Shar and her team basically interact with the other side of who I interact with. So kind of that midlife woman who's trying to figure out how do they be more authentically themselves, whether that has to do with nutrition or health or just who they are. So I thought it'd be really interesting to have Shar on here to talk a little bit about the work that she does with women and specifically how that work actually interacts with the work that I do with men. At least that was my thought about what we talk about today. Shar, is that kind of your thought as well? Yeah,
let's do it. Yeah, awesome. I'm excited.
Good. One of the things that I loved about when I was reading your bio and just what you told me about, you know, what you do and my experience of you is that it seems like a big piece of what you do, which we're going to talk about today, is just helping women break out of cycles. I do the same thing with men. And by cycles, I mean cycles of dieting, cycles of exercise, cycles of fad, whatever. Because one thing that I found in my life and with the men that I coach is that just jumping into another cycle doesn't actually produce a better, more authentic you, right? It's just 100%. Jumping on the next train until the next train comes by and then jumping on that one. And that never really helps, right? It never really gets to the point where it's like, okay, now I can jump off that and actually just be authentically me. So maybe before we start talking about that, which I definitely want to get to, tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you end up here? Why did you decide, hey, I want to work with people in kind of this midlife stage that are dealing with these things? Was there something that happened to you?
100%. So my background actually is in IT project management. So I'm a burnt out IT project manager turned perimenopause health and sustainable fat loss coach. And it was really based on my own frustrating journey. So it was in 2020 when I woke up and I was at my highest weight. And prior to that, I was jumping from fad diet to fad diet. And although I would have success in all these diets, whenever I went back to what I would deem as like normal eating, I would gain all that weight back and then some. And I was just really, really tired of feeling so restricted in my food or the stories that I would tell myself. And that's when I ended up asking for help. And I'm a high performer, Josh. And so for someone who, you know, is a high performer, it's really hard for us to ask for help, especially when I thought I was doing all the right things. And I hired a macro coach because I was following her and what she was posting. It seemed like people were eating whatever they wanted and still getting results. And so macronutrition, if those aren't aware of it, it's your combination of, it's basically your calories in your food, and it's broken down into like protein, carbs, and fats. And we all need certain portions of that depending on, your lifestyle, your goals, and all that. And what was really eye-opening for me when I understood macronutrition was like, wow, I can still have pizza and beer on a Friday night and meet my goals. And it was it ended up being a flexible lifestyle for me because for so many years I had restricted myself. And it was really eye-opening to me. I think the last fad diet I did, my husband is a huge supporter of me and we both did it, and it was keto. And I remember we were at a party and my son, who said to me, he's like, "Oh, Mom, why don't you eat some fruit? It's healthy for you." And I said to him, I'm like, "Well, honey, there's carbs in fruit and carbs are bad for you." And he looks up at me with his big brown eyes. He's like, "Well, Mom, if carbs are so bad for you, why are you feeding them to us?" And I was like, oh my God, like what are my actions teaching my kids? And so it was in that moment, I knew I had to make a change. It wasn't necessarily just for me, but also for my kids. And so I went back to school while I was still an IT project manager, and I just want to learn more about it. I had no idea that I would actually pursue this as my career. And then friends started asking me, "Hey, what do you know about this? Like, I see I lost 25 pounds and I've actually built a body that I had been chasing for years in terms of looking toned and just putting more muscle on." And so I started helping friends, and then I just enjoyed it. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to just put it out there. Maybe somebody will pay me for this." And then sure enough, that's how it started. And then I hit burnout. And that was really the transition from corporate into full-time coaching for sustainable fat loss. More recently, though, I was struggling through what I now know as perimenopause. But for about 9 months, I thought I was going batshit crazy. Like, I was forgetting things. I was blowing up at my husband. I was blowing up at my kids. They were telling me they're walking around eggshells. And I was like, what is happening to me? And I would go to the doctor. They would run your standard labs and they'd say, "No, everything is fine." I'm like, how is everything fine? Like, I don't feel like myself. I'm like, something is going on. And at the same time, I actually took another certification, kind of in parallel as I was going through this, and it was perimenopause and menopause coaching certification. So in my head, I kept saying, I think this is perimenopause, but the doctors, I saw 6 different doctors that whole year, and they told me, "No, it's not perimenopause. You're too young." I was 44 at the time. I'm now 47. I went through this kind of transition and really felt alone because I didn't feel anybody was listening to me. And then I found a team of functional practitioners who are now part of my team because I'm like, I know that there are women out there who are struggling and they're not getting the answers. And so through that journey of myself, I did the menopause hormone therapy, and it's like night and day, Josh. Like, but I also have to say though, because a lot of people will say, "Oh, let's just do the menopause hormone therapy and everything's going to be great." No, there are still things that you need to do with your nutrition that will supplement the hormone therapy that you do as well. So hormone therapy alone is not going to give you, that everything that you need. You have to supplement with both the nutrition and some lifestyle choices. And that's what I really empower women to do, is creating this flexible lifestyle, because we still need to live. Like, I still want to enjoy a beer on the golf course. I have eliminated a lot of my alcohol because I knew that it was no longer serving me like I had used to. I don't know, you can't see it behind me, but I've got a big vase full of like wine corks because my husband and I, we would drink a lot of wine, like almost every night. But then we noticed it was more of just a habit, something that we would just do out of habit. And it was like, okay, like now I understand the impacts of alcohol with fat loss and even in perimenopause and hot flashes. So my whole evolution with food has changed throughout these last 4 or 5 years since I started my health journey. And that's what I really empower women to do as well, is like, yes, we want to make changes, but don't try and make them all at once. Have a gradual approach. We kind of map out their full year, and so that they have certain things that they focus on. Because I find with women, they'll start these journeys and they try and do everything all at once. And then they start to feel like they're failing because, they miss one thing and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like what's happening? I feel like I failed." And so that was kind of a long answer to your question, but
no, it's a great answer.
Kind of how I got to where I'm at today.
One of the things that you said that really stood out to me a lot is you found that it wasn't serving you anymore. And I think from my experience, because obviously just working with men in, around the same age demographics as the women that you work with, including myself, right? Like we're all around the same age. You get to a point where it's like, okay, yeah, this is obviously I can't eat the way that I did in my 20s anymore, or I can, it's just my body's not going to look the same as it did in my 20s, right?
Yeah.
But here's the other thing that I think is more important about that is that, food can either be your servant or you can be its slave.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't say that very well. I'll say it again. Food can either be your servant or you can be its slave. And I think for a lot of us, we're the slave and we don't even realize it because, I don't know about the women that you work with, but several of the men that I work with, and including myself, I've dealt with this in the past as well, is that food can also be used as a medication, especially depending on how you grew up with food and what your history with food is. I was working with somebody that I was coaching, 6 months ago or so. And one of the things that I noticed with him, even though we weren't doing food coaching, is that with the stuff that he was going through with his divorce and the other things that he was dealing with, is that he always felt like it was a treat to have sugar. And his mind was so set on the fact that that was a treat and that was a positive thing for him. But what it was doing is it was actually adding more stress, adding more fat. It wasn't serving him, but he looked at it as serving him, right? So a lot of that was just a mindset shift of, well, maybe that's not a treat. Maybe what the treat is putting something that's good in your body that makes you feel great.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the addiction that a lot of us in the modern world have with coffee, as an example, or some sort of caffeine. Is like we think, oh, well, that's going to be a treat and that's going to help me. But it's studied so many different places that overly caffeinating yourself really, really hurts a lot of aspects of your body. But for me, at least, not as a professional like you, but I'm curious your perspective just as the professional. For me, what I've noticed that's helped me is, frankly, more than anything, is just the mindset shift.
Yeah.
Just the mindset shift of how do I, if I really love and care about myself, am I consuming the things that are actually really good for me and that are healthy for me and that make me feel alive? Or am I consuming the things that somehow I've convinced myself are like that treat? What do you say to that? Or how do you work with clients as far as that goes?
Yeah. So a lot of us, like primarily my clientele are busy moms in their mid 40s, right? And what do we like to do at the end of a week? We like to wind down with a glass of wine, right? And I would do the same thing. And I said, is that really serving you? And when I ask about the things that bring them joy, they're like, maybe a walk with my kids or going out with my husband. I'm like, instead of rewarding yourself or winding down with that glass of wine, why don't you go out with a walk with your kids just to see how you feel? A lot of their journeys, I don't shame them for their choices at all because I make choices that aren't probably the best. So I always look at like we have a good choice, a better, and then the best choice, right? We always want to strive for the best, but you know what? There's going to be opportunities where we're busy moms and we're on the go. So if you have to grab something quick, have a list of foods that can hit your targets and you won't feel guilty about, as opposed to just hitting up the drive-thru.
Not shaming yourself is so much more important than just maybe not getting the absolute best choice.
Yeah, 100% it is. So inside my programs, we do a lot of mindset work. And even for myself, because Saturday mornings was my coffee and cinnamon buns or cinnamon buns with coffee and Bailey's. Like that was my treat. And even early on in my journey, I would still find ways to have those as my treat because that's what I really loved. And then I started to pay attention to like, is this actually fueling me properly to support me throughout the day? And then, as I became more curious about my own journey and getting curious about what fuels me best, I just naturally gravitated toward things that are going to give me the best fuel, right? So now I have I call them my protein oats. I pretty much eat them every day. I love them so much. But you know what? The odd time if I have that cinnamon bun with my coffee and Bailey's, I don't feel bad about it like I used to before. I used to shame myself by either skipping meals to make up for it or like doing extra cardio at the gym, almost to punish myself for my food choices. And so what macros really taught me was the flexibility of food, because all food is just, it's calories and it's made up of protein, carbs, and fats, right? And then there's the micronutrients. So macros will make you look good. The micronutrients will make you feel good. So in my coffee and cinnamon bun example, there's not a lot of micronutrients in there. Whereas if I, substitute it with my oatmeal, each one has the same amount of calories. That's the funny thing, right? My protein oats or the cinnamon bun and coffee and Bailey's has the same calories as my oats, but the oats will give me a lot more micronutrients that the other one won't. So it's just shifting how you think about food and how it makes you feel as well. And that's what I really get my clients to focus on too. But I also get them to like write down a list of foods that kind of bring you joy. And a lot of times those foods are like chips or, Oreo cookies and that. And I encourage them to find ways to include them in their daily targets so that they don't feel so restricted. And that really helps with the mindset as well, because a lot of times we would beat ourselves up if we have that food when really it's like you don't have to feel that guilt anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that, at least that from what I've seen, is that what you also don't want to do is you don't want to go to the other side. You don't want to go to the side where, like, I've done this with my own life as well, where, I'm feeling really bad about my body, or I want to release some weight. And I'm just like, I need to get really hardcore about this, which doesn't ever last long-term either. And when I do that, sometimes it's almost like a shaming in reverse, where it's like I'll punish myself with healthy eating choices that I don't like. Right? Because like I'm feeling shitty about myself. Yes. So I'm only going to like eat celery all the time. And I hate celery. You know what I mean? Like that, that's not doing anything for my mindset. Like sure, it'll help with the macros and help the way my body looks and that sort of thing. But is that really making me happier? Hell no, definitely not. Right? Yeah. Like if I'm forcing down certain vegetables that I hate. So one thing that I've learned in my own health journey is that I have to pick things that I actually enjoy, because otherwise it's not fun. And when it gets not fun, guess what? That's when old patterns of me just wanting to sit down and eat an entire box of Oreos come out, because I'm like, I'm not having any fun here. Right. Yeah. So what I'd rather do is I'd rather pick vegetables that like I actually enjoy, that I really like, that are really good, or some sort of snack that actually tastes good to me, than force feed myself something because I feel shameful. But man, 100%. I see people do that all the time, and I've done it for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to that. So my husband is Asian and we eat a lot of rice. And so like pretty much every night we have rice, and it's jasmine rice. And I've had people comment on social media. They're like, do you know brown rice is better for you? Or do you know wild rice is better for you? I'm like, yeah, I do know that, but I don't enjoy brown rice or wild rice. I love the taste of my jasmine rice, so there's other things that we should focus on that I can improve. I'm not going to pick apart my rice, because like you said, I'm going to force myself to eat brown rice if I don't enjoy it. I would rather have the white jasmine rice. So yeah, I love that example for you.
And I mean, and honestly too, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, because I haven't spent a whole lot of time in there, but I can tell you in the United States, we have such terrible food here. Like every aspect of our food is terrible here. And so honestly, just getting to a point where we're just eating clean, whole foods is almost a miracle in this country. It's that difficult. So that's the other piece that I look at as well, is like, look, you're going to make mistakes. This is not about being 100% perfect at all times, just like life isn't about being 100% perfect at all times. And if that's your expectation and that's how you're going into that, like, man, that just sounds like a miserable life to me. Mm-hmm. Like I still want to be able to eat a bite of ice cream every once in a while. I don't want to be so restrictive to where I just can't ever do that. I remember, I heard this guy, this was years ago. He was a mentor of a buddy of mine. He was not a coach or anything else. He was just a wise old dude. And he would I remember my buddy asked him one time, like, how is it that you stay so in shape? Like the guy never worked out. He never really did anything. And he pretty much ate whatever he wanted. He's like, I don't understand. How are you so healthy? Because he wasn't just skinny fat, like, skinny fat, that's a thing. Yeah. He was like actually healthy. He's like, I just don't understand. He said, it's very, very simple. He said, if I want ice cream, instead of getting out ice cream and getting out a bowl and serving myself a bowl of ice cream, I get myself a big spoonful and then I savor it. Mm-hmm. He's like, I just do that with everything. He's like, I eat what I want, but I savor it. I don't eat too much. And I make sure that it's healthy portions and everything else. And I was like, man, that guy's got it down more than 90% of our health industry. For like sure. Just eat things that are going to be good for you, whole foods and everything else. And just don't overdo it. Just don't go crazy.
Well, yeah, because I do feel like if you restrict yourself too much with like what you deem as healthy food, so when you're around what you deem as like not as healthy for you, you're gonna binge on it. That was my experience, anyways.
For
I
sure.
told the story
Or
within
the
my
cheat
community.
day, like
The
that a
cheat
lot of
day,
people do. It's so bad. It's so bad.
it is.
It's not even just necessary. Like if you are dialed in 6 out of 7 days of the week and then you have a cheat day, it's probably not going to affect your body a whole lot. But where it'll affect is up here. Because
Yeah.
what that tells your mind is that the first 6 days are bad for you. Like you're forcing yourself to do it and it's unfun and it's a miserable experience. That's what you're telling yourself.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you're just waiting for the seventh date. Well, like, I don't want to live my life like that. It would be like, being in a relationship and 6 out of 7 days is awful, but that last day is going to be great.
Yep.
Like,
100%.
I don't want to be
Yeah.
in that relationship. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've experienced with that myself firsthand where, I was so restrictive in my food choices. I remember this is when I was working corporate, someone brought apple fritters to the office. And I love myself. I know you guys don't have Tim Hortons in the States, but here in Canada is Tim Hortons like your donut shop, almost like,
Oh,
what's the
I've
one
been
in
there.
this?
I've been
Okay,
there.
so you've been there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get these apple fritters. They are freaking amazing. But because I had like restricted myself for so long, when they came into the office, I was like, oh my God, I got to eat all these apple fritters. I literally think I ate about 6 apple fritters that day. Like I went for one, I'd go back to my desk and then I'd be like, okay, if they're still there, I'm going to have another one. And at lunchtime, they were still there and I grabbed two more. I felt so sick, so disgusting. I think I had to undo the top button of my pants because I just felt so gross, right? I was not wearing my what I usually call my buffet pants. But now I can be around apple fritters and I'm okay now because I know I can have them anytime I want. Whereas before I thought I couldn't have it because I labeled it as bad or unhealthy. So a lot of my work too is we remove all the labels from foods as well and we just take it for what it is and how it's going to make you feel and how it's going to fuel you. And that really helped me in my own relationship to food. And that's what I help with women that I work with and their relationships to food as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. Is that we talk a lot on this podcast, and I work with a lot of men on mindset, and specifically mindset around, things like food and I should make it even broader. Mindset around things like medicative behaviors. Okay. So we all deal with emotions that we don't want to deal with. And sometimes it's easier to medicate. Medication can take many different forms. Most people, when they think of something like a medication or an addict, an addiction, is they think of drugs and alcohol. Those are usually the first two things that come to mind, whether it's illegal drugs, prescription drugs, alcohol, right? It can obviously be food. We have a huge food problem in this part of the world, especially. It could be relationships, it could be shopping, it could be gambling, it could be anything, right? Anything that we're using to not stay present with whatever uncomfortable feelings we have. So I guess what I want to talk to you about and hear more of your perspective on is, I'm assuming you do some of that work with your clients because without the mindset, everything else just isn't going to work, right? So
Right.
what are maybe like some top things that you can help the audience with if they find themselves medicating? And it could be on food, but I think it'll probably apply to anything. But if they find themselves like, first of all, how are you aware? Let's start with this. How do you think that you become aware of the fact that you even are medicating in the first place?
So I foster a really safe environment for my clients. A lot of them just feel comfortable telling me. So it's the program that I have is almost hybrid where there's a group coaching aspect to it, but there's also a one-on-one. So a lot of times if they don't feel comfortable sharing in a group, they will share with me one-on-one. And I do get access to their nutrition logs. So they do track their nutrition for a period of time because I take them from like tracking to intuitive eating. That's kind of my whole kind of program. But if I notice, and I tell them this at the beginning, I said, I'm a data person. I grew up around data in IT, like I analyze data. So if you're not being truthful to yourself, you're also not being truthful to me. And I can only help you so far. So if you had a night where you binged out, I want to see that in your log. And then I want to talk to you about it and figure out what is the root cause of this. Is there stress going on? I had a lady she would wake up in the middle of the night and have snacks all the time. And it took her about a month or so into the program before she was able to tell me this because she felt a lot of shame around this.
For
I said, okay, if you're waking up that's fine. I said, are you logging it? She's like, no, because I was scared that you're going to see it. And so there's a lot of fear. I said, and it's just having that conversation. I said, I know that you're scared to share this with me, and I understand that. But if you don't, and if this is if this is the identity that you want to become, you have to be truthful with yourself first and foremost, right? And I'm here to guide you and mentor you along that way. And so I truly believe like one of my superpowers is holding space for people, for them to feel safe, to open up. Because these journeys are like, there's some deep rooted issues with food, or addictions or whatever it might be, right? And, I think one of the greatest things that I didn't even think I would ever have with being a coach is women coming to me and telling me how much that I transformed their lives and that their lives are so much better, where I'm just a small town farm girl. So I never think of myself of like having such a big impact with all these women that I've helped. And I think that was probably one of the most rewarding, beautiful things that I could ever have asked for in this journey, because for me, it was sharing just my own struggles. So I'm very open about my own struggles and what I went through with the binge and restrict. And I think by me sharing my struggles, they feel more inclined to share what they're going through as well. So yeah,
yeah, we do. Sure.
Yeah.
I just was going to say, what you're reminding me of is, so for any 12-step program, which is, for those unfamiliar, they deal with addictions. It started with alcohol. It's gone to drugs and things like overeating as well. But the steps of every 12-step program are the exact same. They're just based on a different addiction. And the first step is admitting that you're powerless, admitting that you have a problem, admitting that it's even a thing. Because I agree with you. Like if I think about my own health journey, part of the reason I think it was so difficult for me to finally take it seriously, which I did, I started it about 7 years ago now, is when I actually really took my health journey seriously. That yeah, enough is enough, right? I look back at my childhood and how I ate, but it even goes back before that, because it then goes to how my parents fed them, right? And then I distinctly remember, I don't think I've ever shared this here before, I'll share it with you. And that is, I distinctly remember middle school was one of the hardest times of my life for a lot of different reasons. I went through a very depressive state. I hated who I was. It was a very, very dark time for me. And during that time, I also found food. And specifically during that time, I found Taco Bell. And I would literally come home every single day after school and have my mom or whoever, my grandma, whoever, bring me Taco Bell. And I remember as a 12-year-old kid, I would get out of school, I would watch TV, and I would eat a 10-pack of tacos and burritos by myself. Like that's what I did at 12 years old. Yeah. There's no reason why that there's nothing healthy about that whatsoever. Not even close, right? I'm watching TV. I'm clearly medicating. And I didn't know I was doing it at the time as a 12-year-old, clearly, but I'm clearly medicating. That was so ingrained in me that as I grew up as an adult, that was there. And it didn't necessarily manifest itself with Taco Bell and TV necessarily. But still, if I'm having a tough time and I'm stressed out and I'm overwhelmed, and the nighttime comes and I finally feel like I can relax, my go-to still, even though I've broken a lot of those patterns, my go-to still is snacks and TV. Mm. It still is. And that started all the way back then when I was going through a hard time. So as much as I've tried to break that pattern and then do healthy activities like you're talking about, is that if I just remind myself, like, this isn't actually what makes you feel good. So go for a walk and go hang out with your kids and go do, fill in the blank. Then I always able to do that. But it's amazing how difficult it is to get past those patterns. Do you have anything for the audience, just as far as like things that you found helpful with your clients to move past those patterns that we have?
Yeah, write it down. So for instance, I had clients where they say, I have no control over my food. So write the opposite, because that if you continue telling yourself that I have no control over my food, you're going to believe that.
You believe it. You believe whatever you tell yourself.
Yeah. Your life is a byproduct of your most dominant thoughts, actions, and feelings, right? So if your thoughts are always looping, I have no control over food, I have no control over food, that's what you're going to believe. And you're never going to break that. So I get them to write the reverse. And I get them to write that every single day for 30 days. So where they say, I have control over food and food is always abundant for me, because they have this scarcity. Maybe, I was having a conversation with a client. It was, her grandma was born in the 30s. So there was a scarcity around food. They didn't really know where their next meal was coming from. And I loved how she was able to relate that to something in her childhood, right? But she didn't necessarily think that's where she was getting this repeating pattern from. And so we worked on change the frame. So whatever that negative belief you have, or whatever that belief you have, I always get them to write the opposite of it, and continually, and read it every day until you believe it. When I started my journey, I look nothing like Wonder Woman, Josh, but I wanted to adopt Gal Gadot's vision of being Wonder Woman. And so I would stand there, I have my Wonder Woman pose. And even though I look nothing like her, I think I could take her in a arm wrestle now, but that was the identity I wanted to adopt. And that never left me. Right. And I think I shared with you prior we started to record this. I'm training for a triathlon. I am not a triathlete right now, but I'm adopting that identity, and I know I'm going to do it, even though I don't know how to swim yet very well, or I don't really run, so it's things like that, is getting clear of the identity of who you want to become and bringing that vision forward and taking their steps and actions towards that. You do not have to be perfect, because nobody wants to be perfect. It's too hard to be perfect, right? It's just about being consistent day after day. And that's really what it is.
I love that reframing in a positive way. That's so, that can be applicable in so many areas of your life, right? Like it's, this is unrelated, but it makes me think of relationships, and it makes me think of the people, which by the way, I've been one of. So every time I tell a story, it's like, I've always done this as well. And that is the people that will be like, well, all men are fill in the blank. All women are fill in the blank. And then they're out there dating or looking for a partner, a spouse, or whatever else. And they keep attracting the same exact person to then reinforce their belief. Well, why is that happening? Because they're reinforcing their belief. Yeah. If that person, instead of just saying all men are dogs, said, all men are my brothers, you're going to have a different mindset, and different people are going to come to you, right? It's the same thing like you're saying with food. And it's that example that I gave of that person that I was coaching, 6 months ago or whatever, is if I think that this is my treat, then this is my treat. But if I start saying, let's just pretend that I actually do really like carrots and hummus. So, that's a healthy choice. It's obviously a lot healthier than a chocolate cake, right? And if I then start saying, carrots and hummus are my treat, eventually I'll start believing that. And then all of a sudden, when I really want a treat, I'm going for carrots and hummus instead of going for chocolate cake.
Yeah.
That's a cool place to be. I remember it was a couple years ago on my health journey where it was the first time this ever happened in my life, especially given how I was raised with food. The first time ever in my life, I craved vegetables. And I remember one day being in my kitchen and I was starving and I was like, man, I just crave. And I don't remember what vegetable it was, but I craved it. And it threw me off guard. I was like, wait a second. Did I just crave vegetables? That's cool. So this stuff can't happen, right? Like you just keep telling yourself, this is what's good for me. This is what I crave, etc. Eventually you'll believe it.
Yeah. You tell yourself and you become more aware of how it makes you feel. Right. So after a meal, we can go out and go for takeout, or I can have a home cooked meal. That home cooked meal, I feel so much better afterwards.
Oh, for sure.
Than the takeout. Right. But I don't want to shame myself for takeout, because we're busy. My husband works shift work, and our kids are in competitive sports. So it's like, we're go. And if I'm not planned, that's when, we're resorted to takeout or fast food, but it's a lot less than what it used to be.
For sure. So. Yeah. A couple months ago, I have a story like that too. A couple months ago, my buddy and I were out dancing, which was a lot of fun. And I drank, which I very rarely drink anymore. And I drank. So then I got munchies from drinking, and then I didn't control my munchies. And then I went out and got some fried chicken. And I didn't shame myself, but my body sure did. For the next 2 days, I felt like absolute fucking shit. And it was just a good reminder of what part of that was a treat. Like in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is fun. Let's have some whiskey and some fried chicken. Yeah, that wasn't fun. It wasn't fun the next 2 days when I felt like shit and it was coming out all ends all the time, way too much information here, right? But that did not feel like a treat. And it's amazing how we will convince our minds that something is a treat until, at least for me, I have to have this like violent opposition to that. I'd be like, okay, let me just remind you that wasn't a treat.
I know.
Right.
But it's so true. So my birthday is on St. Patrick's Day, which I absolutely love because even if I have like no friends, I can go out and there's always a party.
There's always a party. That's
There's always
great.
a
I love it.
party.
Yeah.
And so we went out on St. Patrick's Day, and of course I'm going to have my green beer. And I said to my friends, I'm like, this is not going to be a late night because it was on a Monday, right? Like St. Patrick's is on a Monday. So
Right.
it won't be a late night. Famous last words. I think it ended up being like 2 a.m. And same
Of
thing,
course.
like one drink led to another. And then somebody was buying us shots, you know, and that is a rare occasion for me. But I did it and I felt like crap the next day. And like you said, it's a great reminder of like, okay, you know what? It was fun in the moment, but did I have to go all hardcore like that? But I also found too, throughout my journey with alcohol specifically, and I think this, I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple years ago, and I realized that the two are kind of linked. Like, I don't know when to stop sometimes, and I just will drink till I black out. And I realized since having that ADHD diagnosis that that is a tendency. It's kind of that binge and then restrict. And a lot of times, like I drink, and like I don't remember the night or I just black out, right? And so for me, I had to get really true to myself and be like, if I have a really hard time controlling myself around the alcohol, then maybe it's just better that I don't have it in my life at all, you know? And and now I can have like I hardly drink at all. Like I don't even remember the last time I drank aside from my birthday, like a week ago. Maybe I had one at Christmas. Like we'll have people over, and it's usually not like Shar to be not pounding back some beer or whatever. And I didn't have a single lick of alcohol. And they're like, "Oh, you're not drinking." I'm like, "I don't need to drink to have fun. Like I'm having it's about being with you guys and being in your company. I don't need to have that drink to make it anymore." If that makes sense, I don't know.
It does. And I think what I'm hearing you say too is the same thing. I agree. And it's, you know, every time we restrain ourselves, it's even the term diet,
Yeah.
right? The term itself is inferring that I'm letting go of something that's really good and punishing myself. I mean, we don't ever say, hey, I'm out there eating healthy. We say I'm dieting. Well, dieting is saying that there's a lack, right? You're lacking something, which is just, again, if that's your mindset, then that's what you're going to be thinking. You're going to be thinking, oh, I'm missing out, right? Same thing with the drinking thing. There's a difference between, oh, I'm missing out, and actually it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Because if I'm doing this, I'm actually living my best life. I'm actually putting what's best in my body so that I feel the best. So I feel the most energized and alert and awake and everything else. Yet we convince ourselves that something else is going to provide that.
Yeah.
It's interesting you said the ADHD thing, because I also made ADHD, as probably, 80% of the people that listen to this are on. We actually were talking about this a little bit. I had a podcast a little while ago with a guy who specialized in ADHD. He's also a doctor, and he talks a lot about how people are misdiagnosed with ADHD because it's just such a fad to say everybody's ADHD right now. Not saying you're not, or I'm not, or anybody's not, Feel free to add all the comments about how much you hate what I just said. I don't care. But the point is that what I've found is that I have never met a person that has ADHD that's not also an addict. They go hand in hand. Because the thing is that one of the things about mainly ADHD people, especially the H part, especially if they're that hyperactive, is that with that hyperactive comes extremes, like you were just talking about. Like have a hard time not doing things in extreme. So like I can extremely focus or extremely be distracted, or I can right? It's these extremes. That's all an addict is. All an addict is like, I got to do something to the extreme. All an alcoholic is somebody who drinks alcohol who can't stop drinking alcohol. That power has taken over them. It's taken control over them, right? So saying that, ADHD people are addicts doesn't mean they're addicted to alcohol, but they could be addicted to something. They're addicted to something that it's like, once I start this, I can't stop this. Whatever it is, it could be work.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of very high functioning entrepreneur business owners are also ADHD, which are also addicts, because it's all the same thing. It's all like, I can't stop. I just got to keep going. I got to keep working. I got to keep doing the next thing. I got to keep, it's that same piece. And one of the things that I really like about what you're doing with the women that you're working with is a lot of it seems like just reframing. Like, let's just pause for a second and reframe is this really me living my best life? Or is this me just feeling like I got to do this other thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And my whole philosophy, Josh, is I never want people to feel like they're going on a diet, but I want to tweak their existing diet. So I get them to track, before I give them any information, I want to see what your existing eating habits are. And I always say to them, I'm like, don't change it because I'm going to look in there, because then you're like defeating the whole purpose of this strategy, right? I want you to just log everything as you normally would and let me go in there with a clean set of eyes and let's just make some tweaks. Because as soon as people, like you said, hear the term diet, they think, oh, we gotta have to give up something or restrict something. And that's not really about it. 90% of my clients actually are not eating enough. So we're having to add more into their daily intake, which also causes a lot of mindset shifts, because we as women, most of them come to me for the fat loss. And when I tell them that, hey, you're not ready for fat loss, we actually need to recover your body first to get you to a place, to the main event. I call it the main event, which is the fat loss phase. I said, we need to increase your food intake. And we automatically equate to eating more food to gaining weight. So there's a lot of mindset work that goes along with, each increase every week that we're increasing your food intake, and it sounds so cliche. I need to find another term for it, but it's like, lean in and trust the process, because that's really what it is. And when they come to me and they have these fears, my question back to them is, what evidence do you have that by increasing your food intake that you're gaining weight? And they're like, well, actually not, I'm actually losing inches. I'm like, then keep following the process, right? Because a lot of times what happens is they start to increase their food intake, their metabolism starts to stoke up, and their fat loss hormones start to kick back in and they start to lose the weight. But for so long, they were restricting themselves that your metabolism has adapted to that lower caloric intake. So it's such a beautiful thing to see these women go through. And they're just like, it's like night and day from like the beginning of the program, because we take pictures to it. I was saying this to one of my clients. I'm like, you look so sad at the beginning of the program, and now you're like so full of life, and you can see it in your eyes, and it just brings me so much joy. So I absolutely love what I do. So
I love that. I absolutely love that. So for people that, maybe they're listening right now and they're like, I don't know, I want to talk to Shar. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media platforms. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. The best way is probably Instagram. That's probably where I've got the majority of followers and where I engage the most. And if you're interested in wanting to learn more, you can just message me the word guide, and I'll give you it's called the Ultimate Fat Loss Guide. Because what a lot of diets are really good at doing, they'll teach you how to release the weight, but they are never good at getting you out of that fat loss phase. And so it's this blueprint. It's called nutritional periodization, where you cycle between fat loss, recovery, and maintenance. And that really is your ultimate fat loss blueprint. So you can message me with the word guide, and you'll get that dropped into your.
Fantastic. And we'll have that in the show notes as well. But what's your Instagram handle?
Oh, yeah.
Just so
I guess that would help, right? Designed by Shar with a S, Shar.
All right. And again, if you're listening or obviously you're listening or watching, I don't know what else you would be doing. Check out the show notes as well. We're going to have a link and a reminder to text the word or send the word guide to Shar. So Shar, thanks so much for being on here. Yeah. This is good. This is really good stuff. It's something that, I think just in general, nutrition, diets, food, etc., carries a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of, obligation, a lot of history, a lot of trauma, a lot of past. I mean, there's just so many emotions that surround it that don't get talked about a whole lot. So I appreciate you bringing those up. Thank you for the work you do. It's good stuff.
And thank you so much for this opportunity, Josh, because I want more women to know this information too. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. For everybody else, again, if you like the episode, please like it on YouTube. Even if you're not watching on YouTube, go to YouTube right now, hit the like button, subscribe, leave us a comment, forward it to somebody that you think this would be helpful. If you know of somebody that's kind of gone through this diet, fad, whatever cycle, and they're having a hard time getting out of it, send this to them. Maybe this will be inspiration or help for them. So thank you all. And until next time, we'll see you later, you derelicts.